All right, guys, so in light of us getting closer and closer and closer to the truth about the origins of COVID-19, I've stated this from the beginning, and I'll state it again. The bombshell is not the origins of the virus, okay? Because anybody with common sense can reasonably conclude that more than likely the virus leaked from a lab, okay, in China, Wuhan, China specifically, right? If you're paying attention, if you're not a mainstream liberal media propagandist network like CNN that was allegedly afraid to push the lab leak theory because they didn't want to seem like that they were agreeing with Trump. That's actually a real news story that came out, that the former CEO of CNN said, no, you can't push the lab leak theory because you sound like you're agreeing with Trump, right? You're not a propagandist. Again, it's reasonable to conclude that that's probably where the virus came from. The real bombshell is whether or not it was U.S. taxpayer funded. And we're getting closer and closer and closer to the truth about the question of whether or not it was U.S. taxpayer funded and who knew about it, including people at the top, okay, of this type of stuff, like Dr. Fauci, who recently announced his retirement, as we have some bombshell email leaks that show that Fauci started panicking at the beginning of the pandemic when people were discussing the origins of this virus and the possibility that this leaked from a lab, so much so that he used government resources to commission a study to try to disprove the lab leak theory, which we know today has not been disproven. In fact, it looks like is actually most likely the origin of the virus. And that raises a whole lot of questions about his motivations for why in the world would he want to disprove the lab leak theory so much. So without further ado, let's actually play a quick clip here from Fox News so you guys can get a better understanding of what's going on here. And then I'm going to play a clip with Jim Jordan, who is in charge of investigating this, and him talking about it and him giving his opinion on these new revelations. Take a look.
The new emails show Dr. Anthony Fauci commissioned a scientific paper in February of 2020 to disprove the Wuhan lab leak theory. And she goes on to write this. The House Oversight Subcommittee published email Sunday in which the paper's co-author admits Fauci prompted him to write the paper with the goal of disproving the lab leak theory. This would be quite explosive, Bill.
Yeah, it would, because he's effectively using government resources to tout the orthodoxy, which we know now is not true. That's a sign of what everyone was up against. They just wouldn't look at the question in an open and honest way.
And 8 weeks later, Bill, he was at a White House press conference and referred to the letter that he approved.
Right.
Right. I mean, look, I don't think you can blame them for not knowing things early on and so forth. But that's not what they said. They categorically pushed their line, and they wanted to silence anyone that thought it might be different. And now, years later, we're learning that what they said wasn't true, and what many of the critics say was true. Even the government has come around to that point of view in terms of the lab.
We'll see how many do.
Congressman Jim Jordan. Mr. Chairman, thanks very much for being here.
Good to be with you, Maria.
You've got two upcoming hearings this week, the subcommittee on COVID, and then, of course, the weaponization of government.
Yeah.
What are we going to learn this week, do you think?
Well, first on the COVID issue, understand that on January 31st, 10:32 p.m., 2020. So right at the get-go, Dr. Fauci gets an email from Dr. Christian Anderson, which says virus looks engineered, virus not consistent with evolutionary theory. The next day, he gets another email from Dr. Gary. Now, these are doctors he's handed out our tax dollars to over the years. Dr. Gary's email says, I don't know how this happens in nature. It would be easy to do in a lab. That same day, February 1st, 2020. So again, right at the start, that same day, Dr. Fauci organizes a conference call. Him and Dr. Collins get on there with Dr. Gary, Dr. Anderson, all these other virologists. They get on there, and 3 days later, everybody changes their story. The same guy who said this would be easy to do in a lab says, oh, now you're crazy if you think it came from a lab. The same guy that says, I don't know how this looks engineered, he changes his story. And then the kicker is, 3 months later, those same two doctors, Dr. Anderson and Dr. Gary, get a several million dollar grant from Dr. Fauci to continue their research. So the fundamental question is, why was Dr. Fauci so consumed with making sure the narrative wasn't about the lab. I think it's because they were doing gain-of-function research there. He didn't want that out. And that was the narrative that everyone on the left bought into, even though the facts and common sense, maybe most importantly, pointed to the lab leak theory.
I mean, this is something that we should all agree on.
Yeah.
Let's get to the bottom of this disease, this virus that killed 7 million people across the world. I don't understand the media immediately going with this Democrat narrative and the CCP narrative rather than forcing for an investigation.
Yeah, why not just give us the facts, be transparent with this, but understand with this virus, they have told us all kinds of things that turned out to be false. I mean, they told us it didn't come from a lab. Now, again, it looks like it sure did because the Department of Energy, FBI, everyone says it came from a lab. Now, they said it wasn't gain-of-function research. Sure looks like it was. They said it wasn't our tax dollars used at that Wuhan Institute of Virology. Yes, they were through EcoHealth. They went there. And then, of course, they told us that the vaccinated couldn't get it. The vaccinated couldn't transmit it. They told us that there was no such thing as natural immunity. This would be the first virus in history where there's no such thing as natural immunity. So time and time again, they told us things that were not accurate. The fundamental question is why? What was was it politics motivating them or what? But I always tell people, I always say, we're Americans. We're big boys and girls. We can handle it.
Right.
It's supposed to be a government of the people, by the people, for the people. So tell we the people the truth. Quit trying to quit lying to us.
Yeah, so shout out to Jim Jordan. And the reason why is because he's continuing to be on this and to investigate this. And slowly but surely, we're peeling back the layers of the truth in regards to the origins of this virus, which, again, I don't think is really the bombshell here. The real bombshell is, again, was it funded by taxpayer dollars and did Fauci know? Okay, we do know that we did, in fact, fund gain-of-function research in Wuhan, right, in that lab. However, they don't call that gain of function, okay? Fauci changed the definition of it, just like they changed the definition of recession. When we, technically, officially went into a recession, all of a sudden they changed the definition of the word recession. You guys see how that works, right? When Democrats get caught, okay, or when something bad happens, they just change the definition of words to suit the narrative that they want to push. It's amazing how that works. But what happened was that you had the mainstream liberal media, people like The View, MSNBC, CNN, calling people racist for simply just suggesting that the virus may have came from China. While you had scientists in Fauci's ear telling him that, hey, this may have leaked from a lab in China. That's what it was telling them. But for whatever reason, Fauci was just so gung-ho about not pushing that, right? Not having that become mainstream. And the question is, why? Why? Right? Why is that the case? The only explanation I can come up with is that Fauci has something to hide or he's covering up something. And that is why he doesn't want the lab leak theory to go mainstream, because there was no reason scientifically to try to debunk that theory the way that they did in such, again, a systemic way. Okay, it was very systemic. The mainstream liberal media was doing it. The government was doing it. Everybody was doing it when clearly, that was a plausible explanation for the origin of the virus. I really do think that there's a lot more going on here. I think that once we actually get to the truth, if we ever get to the truth, Fauci should be held criminally liable. Okay, because not only did, allegedly he may or may not have contributed to funding this or oversaw the funding of this, he also may have used government funds to participate in a cover-up when he knew that it was a good possibility that this may have leaked from a lab. But hey, according to him in the mainstream liberal media, he is the science, right? If you question Fauci, it's like questioning God, right? Y'all remember that? Y'all remember Fauci saying, I am the science, right? You can't question me in response to criticism of him, legit criticism of him. I mean, these Democrats had pictures of Fauci in their background, pillows, merchandise. I mean, they were worshiping this man. When it comes to find out, Fauci may be a political actor, right? He may be a political actor. He could be a part of the reason why the pandemic happened in the first place. Who knows? All this stuff is alleged, but the cover-up and the smearing of scientists and people who simply wanted to ask questions using their common sense leads me to believe that, hey, this man has something to hide, right? And the more and more evidence that comes out, the more we're seeing that yeah, I mean, this guy was clearly engaged in a cover-up, clearly trying to cover up the origins of the virus. I don't understand why COVID leaking from a lab is such a controversial take. Again, the media tried to make it seem controversial because allegedly it's racist, right? It was racist against Asian people or Chinese people to, come to a common sense conclusion that, hey, this may have leaked from a lab. But come to find out, probably they were smearing people as racist because they were probably also complicit in the cover-up, right? They probably went out there and ran defense for the government and smeared people as racist simply for questioning the narrative. Again, that's basically the function of people calling people racist nowadays, right? Most of the time you're called racist because you're trying to cover something up, right? They're trying to cover something up, so they call you racist as a way to shut you up. They call you a bigot, they call you a homophobe, a transphobe, whatever. They use some accusation of bigotry in order to stop real conversation and debate because they have something to hide. They can't win a debate. And lo and behold, you see it happening here. Okay? You're racist if you simply suggest that, hey, no, this might have leaked from a lab in China. That's an easy way to stop debate, right? It's an easy way to stop people from coming to a conclusion that Fauci, for whatever reason, doesn't want you to come to. Amazing. Yeah, this guy should be investigated. And who knows? I mean, maybe even criminally charged and prosecuted. I'm just saying, we're getting closer and closer to the truth. And the closer we get to the truth, the more that it seems like Fauci should, who knows, serve some time. I don't know. But let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.